Catherine Newman, owner of the Miniature Garden Shop. Today's miniature garden project is a miniature garden under glass. Think of it as a new twist on the old terrarium. So you'll start out with the container that you're going to grow your garden in, and the most important feature to remember as a gardener with your terrarium is that there's no drainage holes. So whatever water you put into that environment, any excess that may collect at the bottom has nowhere to go. So to create that artificial drainage area, you can use little pebbles. We're going to use these little glass pebbles in our garden today, and you'll pour those in a nice thick layer. You want to use a small size filler in the bottom because all those small pieces fitting together will create lots of little cracks and pores and extra air space, or if you do happen to overwater, extra space for that water to drain away from the roots of your plants. So you put a nice layer in the bottom. You want to end up with at least a couple inches of that material in the bottom for your drainage area. And then I like to use a piece of dried moss that I'm going to nestle into that filler down in the bottom. You're not going to see this piece of moss at all, but it's going to act like a sponge to help absorb any extra water that may end up in your garden. A little more of those pebbles around. The pebbles are a fun part design-wise in the garden because you can choose a color to match your garden that you're creating, match your design, or to match the interior of your house or a specific theme. If you're doing terrariums for a wedding or for a party or for a particular centerpiece, you can match the color to the rest of your event. Then the next thing that I like to do after I've got my layer of filler and my piece of moss in there is to put in a little bit of activated charcoal. Just kind of sprinkle a thin layer on top. What this will help do is if you do end up with too much moisture in there, it'll just help to help with any odors that might arise from any stagnant situations that might occur. So that's just kind of a little bit of extra protection you can think of in there. Some gardeners use it and some don't. I have an aunt who's been gardening with terrariums for over 30 years and she never puts the charcoal in hers. She doesn't see the benefit, hasn't noticed a benefit. But I kind of do it just as a better safe than sorry aspect. So I'm adding more of the gravel or of the pebbles along the edge, and then you want to kind of take a look and make sure that you've got it even all around the sides. And here's a point at which you can decide if the next thing that we're going to do is to add our soil, and you can decide now if you want to be able to see that layer of soil or if you would rather only see the pebbles. If you'd like to only see the pebbles, then as you add the soil you'll keep pushing the pebbles up along the side and you'll kind of layer. I'll demonstrate here. Add a little bit of the soil in, and I add the soil to the middle. And then if you don't want to see the soil along the edges, you'll push those pebbles up along the edge with a little bit of the soil, and you'll kind of push it up as you go. And that way you can have the pebbles along the edge instead. And so then I would add more pebbles and then be able to push the soil up higher. In this particular garden, I do want to have that layered effect of having the pebbles on the bottom and then my soil. And I like to see the roots growing through the soil right along the edge of my container. So I'm going to just then add my layer of soil. And you want to have at least a couple inches of soil over those pebbles for your plants to grow in. Just like when you're creating your miniature gardens in a basket or in a pot, you want to be sure that you keep your soil nice and level to have the most realistic finished project. Okay, so I've got my soil layer completed. And next we can start the fun part of the actual planting. So I know in the design of my garden I want to have a bench and a little path coming in front, so I'm going to have a border of plants all along the outside. And it's a good idea to know what you're going to do with your garden before you start planting. The more times that you change your mind and rearrange in the garden, the more opportunity you have to kind of create a bit of a mess. So the more you've got figured out ahead of time and the less you have to move things around, the easier it'll be in the long run. So in the back, I'm going to put, this is a little creeping fig, happens to be variegated, and it's going to send out long stems like this, and it sends out little roots as it grows all along. And he's going to go in the back of my container, so I'm going to dig a little bit of a hole there. And sometimes I'll tease away a bit of the excess soil. And stick that guy in at the back. This is going to be my plant that gives me a little bit of height to frame the garden behind that bench. Next, I'm going to use this little selaginella. This is a cupcake moss. And this selaginella happens to be growing in a deeper container than what I have depth of my soil here. So I'm just going to remove a little bit off the bottom so that it doesn't sit too high in my planting, and so that the depth of my plant better matches the depth of my soil layer. I think I'm going to put it right on the side here, so this will look like a little bush sitting next to my bench in my miniature garden scene. And then you kind of push the soil up around your plants as you go. Okay, now I've chosen plants with a variety of different colors and textures and forms so that we get the most interest in our garden. All of these plants are also selected for the fact that they can live in this enclosed high humidity environment. This is what you would consider an open terrarium because it's not completely closed off. There is an open area for exchange between the air inside the terrarium and outside. But even this much enclosure does alter the environment enough that you can still consider it a terrarium even though it isn't entirely closed with a lid like the traditional terrariums that you may think of. This is another type of selaginella, and this happens to be a yellow variety. And I think I'll stick it on the other side of my creeping fig here. And same idea, taking off some of that excess soil on the bottom. I'm going to kind of turn that plant so that it fits like putting together different pieces in a puzzle and fits just the area that I need in my garden. Okay, now I'm going to start using a few shorter plants. This little plant is a dwarf mondo grass, an Ophiopogon, and it's nice because it'll give me that grass-like texture. I've got lots of rounded plants, mounded plants, and this will give me a spiky texture for contrast. That'll make a nice little accent. I'm just picking out anything that's unattractive, any little brown leaves or yellow leaves. It's a lot easier to get rid of them now than it will be once my garden is all planted and finished. Okay, again I'm going to make a little hole for him. And I'm keeping my plants towards the edge of the container, again because I know I want to have room for my bench and my paved areas in the front, so I'll keep those plants towards the edge. The terrarium will look best if you don't have the plants crammed right against the glass, but just close to it. You don't want to look like your terrarium to end up looking like your plants are trying to bust out and they're just caged in there. You want it to look very comfortable. So close to the glass, but not crammed along the edge. Okay. Last plant I think I'll add is a little bit of baby tears. This is a traditional terrarium plant, and I only need a small piece of it. This is one that's really easy to divide, just like your sedums are for your outdoor gardens. And I just kind of stick my thumbs about where I want to make the split, and I hold on to the plant with my fingers in the back and stick my thumbs where I want that split to start, and then just gently pull it apart to get the piece that I need. And again, I know this is too much soil to be able to fit in my terrarium, and I know that baby tears will root out wherever the stems touch the soil, so I don't have to be too concerned with taking off that extra bit of soil because there's still plenty of roots there to support what I've got on top. So I'm going to stick that green guy, the green baby tears, next to that yellow selaginella. And I've got a nice planted, kind of a framed area that I can now start putting in my bench and my finishing accessories. So I'm filling in, kind of tucking down the soil and filling in a little bit. Then the next step will be to water in what I've already got planted, and I'm going to use really sparingly use the water because again we don't have any drainage. If we happen to get too much water inside, there's nowhere for it to go other than what we've tried to create with the pebbles, so you don't want to push your luck by overwatering to start with. So I just gently water the plants that I've already planted, and then I kind of use the water to wash down the edge of the glass too along the outside. And then I want to put just a little bit of water to kind of settle down the open areas where I'm going to put my paving. I've already planned out where the paving area is going to go, and I've used these little flat pieces of slate. They're a fabulous little paver because they're a uniform, pretty much uniform thickness, so they're easy to lay out and they look really natural in the garden. And I've laid them all out ahead of time here so that I don't have to do a lot of rearranging inside my garden. So I'm just going to put my pavers in same way that I had them laid out. When you're laying these stone pavers, you want to have as tight of seams between the stones as you can. And that will give you the most realistic, not only the most realistic looking patio, but the nicest looking patio or paved area as well. So they just kind of fit together like a puzzle. And I'm going to take that right to the front of my planter so it'll look really inviting to the viewer. Okay, so there's maybe one more piece. I'll stick it over on the side. Okay, and I'm just pushing this down here and there because the more level we can get this paving area, the more realistic it will look. And then my bench will sit right on top there. Okay, I need to turn it just so I can take a look real quick. I can see that I've got a couple of little openings here, and I'm going to use a little bit of this yellow baby tears in those spots. And again, I'm just going to take a tiny little division, make a little hole, stick that guy in there, just as a nice little accent and to finish off the edge of the garden. Do the same thing on this side. Little repetition to kind of frame the end of the path. Okay, I'm going to water along this front edge just to kind of clean things up and to settle in my new plants. Okay, and I can see that I don't like how that stone isn't level there, so I'm going to add a little bit more soil and try and bring that up just a little bit. Okay, that looks a little bit better. Once again, being real gentle with the water, real light with the watering. Okay, so our terrarium is about finished. Just time for a few finishing points. I like to use a little bit of the filler that I used in the bottom on the top of the garden too, to just kind of tie things together. So in a few of these little openings here and there, I'm going to use a few of those pebbles. And I just like the color and the texture that they add. And they make your garden, help to make your garden interesting from all angles. When there's little places that you can't get to, a pair of tongs or a long pair of tweezers can be really handy to get things where you want them. And they're also handy when you're maintaining your garden. If you need to snip something off or remove a leaf or two, if you can't get your hand where you need it to go, the long tweezers are really helpful. So just a few pebbles here and there. I don't like to cover all the open spaces with the pebbles. I think it's neat to see a little bit of the soil here and there because that little bit of darkness is a nice contrast and really adds some depth and richness to the garden. So just kind of here and there I'm tucking these pebbles. And I know that once those baby tears grow I probably won't even see them, but they are a nice finishing piece. Then lastly are just the little accents that really personalize your garden. I think in this particular landscape I might put a little red bench or a little red watering can there on the bench. Maybe a set of wind chimes here in the selaginella off to the side. Let's see, what else could we add? Maybe a little bird bath in front. And I think that makes it about complete. So lastly, you just take a look on all sides, make sure there's no more places to finish. Everything looks pretty well planted and in place. Then the last thing we'll do is to kind of clean that glass off. And I like to use, this is a cloth that you can use to clean your glasses or your computer monitor, and it does a really nice job of polishing up that glass. Oops, tipped over the bird bath. To help that bird bath stay up, if you have accessories that seem to fall over, don't be afraid to use glue to stick them down, or you can use something like a little fern pin that you could hot glue to the bottom of this, and then it would be like a stake to help keep that set in place in the garden. Okay, now to take care of the terrarium for maintenance, you'll want to water carefully. You don't want to overwater. You can use a little squirt bottle to help the mosses especially like to have a real humid environment, so you can just use a squirt bottle to spritz them every now and then. Water sparingly. And then you want to set it in a place that has good bright light, but it needs to be indirect light. Think of this as like a little greenhouse, and if you were to put this in direct light where the sun would directly hit it, it's really going to heat up and pretty much cook anything that's inside your container. The glass will just intensify that sunlight and bake all your plants inside. So bright light is important, but definitely indirect light. So this is a great little project that you can then display as a centerpiece on your table or as a neat desktop garden to take to work or to have in your home office, or even outside on a porch or in a shady spot in the garden. They can be fun too. So your project is complete. If you have any questions while making your own garden, please don't hesitate to contact us and check out the website, miniaturegardenshop.com. Thank you.